What's up, Wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy from Mtg back on camera, looking good, feeling good. Got some spoilers for you. That's why you're here, so let's go ahead and get to those. Alright, as usual, let's start the day with some common and uncommon stuff for limited, but there's really not much of it today, to be honest. Most of the stuff today is pretty exciting, but we did see Mistral Singer get a reprint. It's a Windrake with prowess, but we also saw Ranger's Guile, which I'm a little bit more excited about. This is just 1 green mana for an instant. It's a common, and target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof till end of turn. Well, it's not a Blossoming Defense, but I'll still take a Ranger's Guile reprint because it's literally the next best thing to a Blossoming Defense. Again, quite literally, so I'm really happy to have this card in Standard because I've been wanting Blossoming Defense back for a long time right now, and Ranger's Guile will definitely do the trick. Also, as of last night, we can welcome Kitesail Freebooter back to Standard. Just couldn't stay out of Standard for too long. They had to reboot the Freeboot. And this card's good, in case you've never seen it before. It's 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 1/2 human pirate with flying. And when it ETBs, target opponent reveals their hand. You duress them. That's basically it. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. Exile that card till Freebooter leaves the battlefield. Well, I've seen a few probably newer players ask why you wouldn't just play Duress, because it costs half the mana of this. Well, in this case you get a body, which is almost always better and worth the 1 mana investment. It's got a relevant creature type. It already sees play in modern humans decks, but it could see play in standard humans decks as well, with old General Kudrow and whatnot. So I do like that. Plus it exiles the spell for as long as it's on the battlefield. If you duress a spell, maybe they could get it out of the graveyard somehow. There's plenty of ways to do that. So Kitesail Freebooter, in case you don't know, good little card here, even though it's just a 1/2 flying body. That means a lot, especially with Anthem effects and whatnot. Kitesail can get pretty dangerous quickly, and even if they can kill it, you've still probably taken them off of their curve, which is a huge deal in a game of Magic. Let's just keep going on the reprint train here, because we also saw Volcanic Geyser. I'm actually really excited about this for some reason. This is 2 red mana and X for an instant. That's the key part of this card, and it deals X damage to any target. So it's a fireball blaze type thing. I guess we'll call it a blaze, but it costs an extra red mana in order for it to be instant speed, which is totally worth it in most cases. We already had a couple of big X, deal X damage to whatever spells. You know, we had Electro Dominance in the format, but that's not instant speed. We do have Teferi to help cast it at instant speed, which makes the instant speed on this a little bit less desirable. But maybe after Teferi rotates, this will see some play. I highly doubt it, but I could see maybe, a Jeskai or some similar control deck wanting to use a good old fireball at instant speed to end the game every now and again. But up next is Experimental Overload, another card I kind of like, honestly. This is 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a red for a sorcery. Create an XX blue and red weird creature token, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your yard. Then you may return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Experimental Overlord. I keep wanting to call this Experimental Overlord, even though it's not a creature, but it does remind me an awful lot of Invade the City, but you get a lot of value for that extra mana, and that you get to return an instant or sorcery to your hand, which is actually really powerful. Very powerful. I could see maybe copying this. I've seen a few people saying, oh, it's sad that it exiles, but that's actually fairly common for effects like this to exile, so that you can't loop them, or that you can't, get an instant or sorcery back, cast it, and then get Experimental Overlord back, or Overload, I did it again, Overload back and cast it and get the thing that you got back first back again and keep looping it. Yeah, there's a lot of safeguards inherent in the fact that you exile this, so I'm not surprised by that at all, but I do want to experiment with this card. Invade the City is obviously not very good, but when you staple a get back or removal spell or counter spell to it, that's actually great. Again, especially with Teferi in the format, letting you cast this at instant speed. So on your opponent's turn, maybe you make a blocker that's like a 3/3 or something like that, and get back a counterspell, which is good. That seems pretty good to me. I'm not sure it's good enough to actually see play, but effects like this are always relatively powerful, so I actually wouldn't be surprised if this found a deck eventually. But we also saw the return of Shrines today, which means that my predictions video is almost all correct at this point. I was pretty sure we were going to get Shrines back, and here they are. But they're called Sanctums now, apparently. We'll start with Tranquil Light right here. This is just 1 white mana for a legendary shrine. And you can pay 5 and a white to tap target creature, but the ability costs 1 less to activate for each shrine you control. So if you just got this out, it costs a total of 5 mana to activate. Let's move on to Sanctum of Calm Waters right here. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a legendary shrine. And at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, oh wow, did I actually say that you could have 2 copies of Sanctum of Tranquil Light out? You can, they're all legendary. But anyway, at the beginning of pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. If you do, discard a card. So this looks actually like one of the better ones of the cycle. It's definitely, I'm pretty sure I know what the best one is, but we'll get to it a little bit later. This one costs more than all of the others, save for one of them. But again, we'll get to that one a little bit later. But it probably should cost a little bit more than the others, because this is a relatively powerful effect, especially if you have any more than just this one shrine out, right? Drawing 2 and discarding 1 is incredible. That's really, really good. But even drawing 1 and discarding 1 is not terrible if this is all you have out, but it's probably not good enough to see standard play in that case. Maybe if you're playing more shrines, you could see play, but then you have the problem of having to dedicate slots in your deck to shrines, which I don't think you necessarily want to do. But let's move on to Sanctum of Stone Fangs. That's a cool name. It's 1 and a black for a legendary shrine, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. Well, this one is one that I'm actually really interested in, and I like it, but it's not good. I really don't think this is a great shrine, to be honest. This one doesn't really affect the board at all, right? Maybe it triggers life gain strategies. Maybe if you have enough shrines, this is effectively your win condition in the shrine deck. So that seems decent. Once you get like 4 shrines out, which is a lot, and probably a little tough to do, but once you get 4 shrines out, an 8-point life swing every main phase is pretty decent. But again, if your opponent has creatures, you still probably end up dying. But, again, I hate that this doesn't really affect the board in any way, but it's still not terrible in terms of a win condition for the Shrines deck, especially in, formats that get to play more than just the few shrines we got to see today. But we'll move on to Sanctum of Shattered Heights right here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a legendary shrine. You can pay 1 and discard a land or shrine card to have Sanctum of Shattered Heights deal X damage to target creature or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. Well, I don't really want to discard shrine cards in a shrine deck, to be honest, unless I've already got enough, but you really never can have enough in a shrine deck, so I'm probably not going to be discarding too many shrines unless you absolutely have to answer a thing right now, which this card could be somewhat decent at, but I mean, even if you only have if you have 2 shrines out, it's still just a shock. So I'm not sure how good that is, and it's not even really a shock because you can't point it at the face. So I don't love this, to be honest. Discarding a land is okay for the most part. I don't mind that, but I really don't like having to pay, 3 mana for this, 3 mana for 2 more shrines, so you're paying like 9 mana so that you can bolt a creature. And you still have to discard a card. It's just, this one doesn't look very good to me. But one that does look very good to me is Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest right here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a legendary shrine. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add X mana of any one color where X is the number of shrines you control. Well, this doesn't really affect the board either, but this is actually a pretty decent ramp. To be honest, it's not bad. Right? If you only have this one shrine out, well then, suddenly, you just get an extra mana every turn. So that's ramp. It's not bad. And you get a mana of any color, which is really sweet too. I actually really like this shrine. I'm not sure that it's going to end up seeing standard play because in green ramp decks that want it, it's probably like the only shrine that you play, and you can't have multiple copies in play at the same time, which might be why you want to discard shrines to Sanctum of Shattered Heights. I want to throw that out there. You can discard shrines to it. So maybe you discard extra shrines you already have copies of on the battlefield. That's a thing. But still, Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest, I think, is the best shrine we've looked at so far. In a vacuum, right? In a deck with a whole bunch of other shrines, I like the one that draws cards. I like the one that deals damage and whatnot. But just as a standalone card on its own merits by itself, this is probably the one that would be most likely to see play without the aid of other shrines. But I still doubt that's going to happen. It just looks really, really interesting to me, right? It's ramp that's really difficult to interact with unless they can destroy enchantments and stuff. It's just not... It ain't so bad. But I'll move on to Sanctum of All, which is the 5-color shrine. Holy crap. It just costs all 5 colors. And it's a legendary enchantment. It's barely a cloud. Big old shrine in the sky, but it doesn't look like a shrine to me. It just looks like another cloud. But anyway, let's talk, what does the card do, Dev? At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. Interesting, right? Now, having 6 shrines out is tough. It's really very difficult. But once you do, getting double triggers on your Sanctum of Stonefangs seems like it'll win you the game, like, pretty freaking quick. And if you don't have your Sanctum yet, double triggers on Sanctum of Calm Waters will help you get to it. I also like that this gets shrines out of the graveyard and puts them into play. That's something I haven't seen a lot of people really pick up on yet. Because if your opponent can remove your shrines, boom. It seems good. If you discard shrines to Sanctum of Shattered Heights, now you can get them back fairly easily. Put them right onto the battlefield. So, really interesting card, but I don't really see anything here in the shrines that we've seen so far that make it like a playable standard deck. If anything, it's probably just like a janky thing. If you want to build the 5-color standard shrines deck, go ahead. Have at it. But I'm not seeing how it looks very good. But hey, in Historic, we just got all the other shrines in the anthologies, so really have fun playing the shrines in that format. Let's move on to Shacklegeist, one of a couple of spirits that we got today. Geist is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a spirit with flying, and it's a 2/2. It can block only creatures with flying, and you can tap 2 untapped spirits you control to tap target creature that you don't control. So this is interesting. I'm not actually sure this sees play in modern spirits, much less there is no standard spirits deck. But I'm not really sure this sees play in modern spirits, but it is cool that it can tap itself and something else to tap something down. But all things considered, I'm not sure it's a good enough ability to really see play, but a 2 mana 2/2 flying, even one that can only block creatures with flying, is not the worst rate. If you want a good spirit, let's check out Ghostly Pilferer. This is another 2 mana spirit. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 spirit rogue. No, more rogue support, y'all. And whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. Discard a card. Ghostly Pilferer can't be blocked this turn. Well, the overwhelming response to this card from the majority of the competitive community has been, And I just don't get that. Like, as Magic players, are we just spoiled by, like, super broken cards? So when we see a card that's just good, we're like, yeah, it's bad. It's a bad Magic card. It's not. In case you missed it somehow, this has 2 separate draw a card clauses on it. The ability to go unblockable, and it's a discard sink. You can just discard cards to this, as many as you want, no activation cost, all willy-nilly, and then reanimate stuff out of your graveyard, or maybe escape stuff out of your graveyard, or maybe Underworld Breach stuff out of your graveyard. I don't know, it's your life, you do you, bud. Like, I'm not, but a free discard outlet has always been at least a thing that we mention when evaluating cards that have that, and for the most part, I've just seen people being like, no, you have to discard a card to make it unblockable, it's stupid, I don't like it. Well, you're probably drawing some cards off of this, even without the companion mechanic still in the format the way it was intended to be. This card would be much better if there were companions, but even so, we've got stuff like, Escape in this format, which could matter an awful lot. We've got Light Up a Stage in this format, so if they cast spells off of that, right, there's a lot more ways that people cast spells from not their hand than you might consider in this format. So I actually think this card has like a real chance at least being a sideboard card, but if there is some sort of, blue aggro or tempo deck or something, this looks very, very good for that. The ability to go unblockable, the ability to pitch cards at will, and the ability to draw cards 2 different ways. Yeah, you have to pump mana into it one way, but still, you're at card parity. If you discard a card, get this through, draw a card, when you untap it. Again, you had to pay mana, but some of these tempo decks really won't mind doing that in the later turns because they'll have that extra mana. So, I don't know, y'all. I see a lot of potential in this card, and even though I think it's going to have to find a home, a deck to go into in the first place, I would in no way call this a bad Magic card. This card does at least 3 things that I really, really like. But final card of the day already? Are we really already there? Yeah, it's Barrin, Tellurian Archmage right here. 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a 2/2 human wizard. Of course, it's legendary. And when Barrin, Tellurian Archmage, enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So this is another one that people are just calling bad. And I don't understand. Again, are we spoiled on broken cards? Because like once we see a decent card, we're like, no, it's stupid, I don't like it. Well, this is like 100 times better than Exclusion Mage. And Exclusion Mage saw some play in the standard tempo decks every now and again, right? But this is like way better than Exclusion Mage. It's a little bit more mana intensive. You have to be playing, heavy blue, but like decks do that, right? So I actually really like pretty much everything this does, It's interesting, too, how it's designed. You can tell this was Teferi's teacher, because this both draws a card and bounces a permanent. That's where he learned that. Mostly, I've been seeing people talk about how this card could be better. And yeah, there are multiple ways it could be better. You're correct about that. It could have Flash, in which case it would probably be a disgusting Magic card, probably a little too good. With Flash, if I'm being quite honest, but it could have Flash. It could also let you draw a card no matter what gets bounced. You bounce a creature back to your opponent's hand, you draw a card, but that would probably also be like a fairly abusable Magic card right there. So I think they tried to make this more fair than broken, and it's probably better for that. But I mean, if nothing else, this is 3 mana for a body that also bounces something. So it's just a mana war, but like, it's probably better, Like, it's a little bit more mana intensive than Mana War, but it can also bounce Planeswalkers, which is a big deal. And as a matter of fact, late in the game, if you top deck this, you can bounce your own. You can bounce your own Teferi, your own Narset, whatever, to create a little bit more value, reset their loyalty, which might really matter, especially in the case of Narset. Being able to reset that loyalty is super important, and you'll draw a card, too. Like, that's pretty good. Plus, if your opponent is playing stuff like Brazen Borrower and Teferi, you have a Barrin out that they don't end up bouncing, well, suddenly you get some value off of that. So, not a terrible Magic card. As a matter of fact, I think it's quite the good Magic card, and I'm amazingly one of the only people saying that today. How could you not look at this and be like, oh, yeah, that's good. It's not amazing, but there are a lot of people who are looking at this and just being like, oh, this card's bad. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I mean, it's a 3-mana body that bounces a thing and can draw you cards. Like, what are you... It's good. It's also blinkable, right? You can blink it with Yorion or just a Thassa or a bunch of other stuff and bounce more things. It's just a good card. It's a good Magic card. Stop calling it bad. It's good. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in a mood today. I woke up and I was like, oh, let's get some juicy cards here. We got some more spoilers. It's Monday, y'all. And I saw a few cards that I really liked. So I go over to Spikes on Reddit to see what the competitive community's talking about. And they're just like dumping all over these. Just like, oh, these are terrible cards. It's like, am I going crazy? Am I nuts? Because like the last 2 cards we talked about today look at least like good Magic cards. I'd rate them like a 7. They're good Magic cards. But like it seems like the competitive community just says like these are actively terrible cards. Wait, there's one more card today now that I think about it. And that is 9 lives. 1 and 2 white for an enchantment with the best art I have ever seen. It's got hexproof, remember that, and if a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on 9 lives. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on 9 lives, you exile it, and when 9 lives leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. But is the card good or is the card bad? Now, this is one that a lot of the competitive community is like, oh, it's like really good. This is a great life gain card. I don't think so, champ. I have seen a fair number of people misread the card and either forget that it has hexproof halfway through reading it, and then they comment something like, oh, you just Elspeth Conquers Death. They're like Brazen Borrower back to their hand and they lose the game. No, it's got hexproof. But the other mistake I keep seeing people make is people that seem to think you can like Yorion this and blink it and refresh it. You'll lose the game. If it leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. You can't just bounce it back to your hand or something or blink it. You'll lose that way. So keep those very important things in mind. But is the card actually good? Spoilers, I kind of already answered that question the first time I asked it. I don't love this card. I love the art. I want a print of the art. I want to hang it back there. Where the mystical readings thing is, this with the skull, I actually think that might be slightly cringy. Um, but this artwork wouldn't be. This art would be incredible. I actually would probably just hang this in my living room. But in any case, I don't love this in standard right now. It probably does gain you some life, which is how a lot of people are putting it. In a lot of cases, it's going to gain you 9 life. If you're playing against Cavalcade or something, they'll just eat through it super fast. Same thing is true of just mono red with like Scorch Spitter triggers and stuff. Like they'll just eat through these counters like super fast. You don't necessarily want that. Same thing's true of decks playing like Mayhem Devil, which is a lot of decks. A ton of decks. Play Mayhem Devil, and all they have to do is sacrifice a few things, and pop, 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 stack up them counters, son. And eventually, you'll just die. You know, again, I've seen a lot of people say this gains you a lot of life, but it also kind of loses you your current life total, right? So if you play this at like 18, it doesn't seem as good as if you played at like 1. And if you do play it at like 1 or 2 life, it's still probably not as good as like Worship and similar enchantments, you know. I just, I got problems. I got issues, especially considering we got, you know, Farika's Libation in this format. We've got, there's actually a bunch of stuff. Planar Cleansing in this format can take this out. And there's more than that, actually. All that said, it could be at least decent against decks like Temur Reclamation, which is the best deck in the format right now. And I say that without any sort of qualm. You know, at the Players Tour over the weekend, Temur Reclamation was like 75% of the top 8. It is definitely top dog right now. So this is at least somewhat decent against that if they can't find an answer to it, and it's likely that they can't. So they can't just explode your face. They have to cast Explosion like 9 times. That's not great. But they could, let me throw this out there. They could just cast Explosion and target you with the card draw to, you know, basically mill you out. So they still have that option. The same thing is true of decks like Cycling, where this does stop Solar Flare from killing you all at one time, but they can still kill you with like a million Drannith Healer activations, or triggers, I mean to say. Or just a bunch of like Valiant Rescuer tokens can come and take your life. So there's also that. There are definitely things you have to worry about when playing this card, even against the decks that it looks decent against. But hey, that's called fair magic. But if you want to talk about some unfair magic, and I know you do, a couple of things you can do with this in Standard is, first of all, you can Tails End the you lose the game trigger, which does trigger and go on the stack. I've seen a lot of people ask that question. You can also discontinuity that if you wanted to, right? And often the last few counters are going to be put on it during your opponent's turn. So, you know, like you could always just wait till they attack in, and then when it comes time to get rid of this because you've put too many counters on it, just discontinuity in the turn right then and there. So you're kind of sort of time walking them and also not losing the game to this at the same time. In other formats, you could always, you know, donate this somehow. What is it called? What is it called? The red donate with the little kitten with the scorpion tail? What's that called? What is that called? It is killing me that I can't remember the name of this. I mean, it's right there on your screen. I will have found it by the time it's time to edit this video, but my memory, man, I have a Standard player's memory. I've been playing for over 25 years, but Standard's always been like my favorite format ever since Type 2 was first introduced. I actually love the dynamic, like rotating nature of it. I think that's cool. Keeps it fresh. Not many people feel that way, but I do. However, that has conditioned me to completely forget about cards as soon as they leave the format in order to make brain space for new cards. So that's probably why I don't remember the name of you, Kitty Manticore, Scorpion Tail thing. Anyway, you just donate it to your opponent. That's what it took me way too long to say. And then just like deal the last damage to them, put the last counter on it, they lose the game. That might be a really fun way to play with this card too. But keep in mind, there are plenty of ways to get rid of this. I've already named a couple, but there's also like Blast Zone takes this out. Flood of Tears can kill this if anybody decides they want to start playing that. There are actually a fair number of ways in Standard to plan for this card if it becomes a thing. By the way, your opponent can also just play a Shadow Spear and make it lose the hexproof, and then you feel really bad. So, again, there are answers to this. Rampage of the Clans. There are answers to this card. But altogether, I think it might see some amount of sideboard play, if nothing else. It does look a little decent in control decks, especially if you have some kind of protection aside from the hexproof. You can counter any of the interactions besides Blast Zone that I've just mentioned, so you could protect this card pretty easily, and it, again, could be decent against decks like Cycling and Team of Wreck, given the conditions are correct. So I don't hate this card, but I'm not quite as excited about it as I see a surprising number of people being. I mean, maybe they're just taken in by the art. I sure am. But that's all them spoilers for you today. We're going to have plenty more this week, though. I'm fairly certain that they're going to finish up at the end of the week, but we've still got plenty to talk about. There are a number of rares and uncommons that haven't been spoiled yet that I think are probably going to be pretty good. I think, too, that Lightning Bolt still hasn't been crunched out of this set. Oh, you see my giant blister right there? Yeah, sorry about that. That's gross. But Lightning Bolt still has not been crunched out of this set. I wonder if they'll actually do it, ladies and gentlemen. I guess we'll have to wait and see in the coming days. But aside from that, I guess I'm done with this one. So just let me know what your takes are down there. Are the cards that I think are better than everyone else thinks they are actually good, or do you also think they're bad? Is 9 Lives better than I think it is? Let me know all your takes down there in the comments section. But aside from that, just like the video, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell for the notifications, check out the link to the Patreon down there. We're almost in Core Set 2021 Standard, and once we get there, any member of the Patreon, even at the $1 level, will get to vote on what decks we do. So get in there. Just throw me $1 a month, Hoss. That's all I ask. It's not too much to ask, is it? I think it's a good value. Anyway, aside from that, you can check out any pre-orders you want to make through the link in the description at TCG Player. If you order through that link, you help me out. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. I'm just really glad that you're here watching these videos. I appreciate all the new subscribers and new patrons lately. You know, I feel like we're getting a little bit back on track on this channel, but make sure that you're still with us when standard season rolls around, because we have got a lot to talk about. Not just decks, but, you know, top 10 cards, top 10 sleepers, all that fun stuff. So sub to the channel if you haven't done it yet. And if you already have, thanks. It means a lot to me. We finally got above 117K subs. How's that 116K for freaking ever? We just crested 117. I want to thank y'all for that. But I guess I'm done. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.